Oregon Supreme Court upholds decision to keep Kristof from running for governor. Oregon Supreme Court upholds decision to keep Kristof from running for governor by Julia Shumway. Oregon Capital Chronicle, February 17, 2022. Oregon Supreme Court upholds decision to keep Kristof from running for governor by Julia Shumway. Oregon Capital Chronicle, February 17, 2022. Secretary of State Shemia Fagan was right to keep former New York Times columnist Nick Kristof off the ballot for governor. The Oregon Supreme Court ruled Thursday. In a 33-page unanimous opinion, the court affirmed Fagan's early January decision that Kristof hadn't lived in Oregon long enough to run for governor. The Oregon Constitution requires candidates for governor to live in the state for 3 years prior to their election. That meant Kristof needed to establish residency by November 2019. He voted in New York in November 2020 and didn't register to vote in Oregon until a month later, which convinced Fagan and nonpartisan staff in the Secretary of State's Elections Division that he didn't meet the constitutional requirement. Kristof has maintained that he has been a resident of Oregon since childhood, and that maintaining a home in New York didn't mean he gave up Oregon residency. He pointed to the property he owns in Oregon and the family farm he manages as further proof that he has lived in the state. We recognize that has long-standing ties to Oregon, that he owns substantial property and operates a farm here, and that the secretary did not question his current Oregon residency, the justices wrote. Moreover, he has thought deeply and written extensively about the challenges faced by those living in rural areas of Oregon and the rest of the country. But that is not the issue here. In making his case to both state election officials and the Supreme Court, Kristof largely relied on legal arguments about Oregon history and the meaning of the word a resident. He didn't provide documents, such as tax returns, that could prove his presence in Oregon to election officials, and he repeatedly ignored requests from the Oregon Capital Chronicle for those documents. The justices called out the lack of documentation in their opinion, referring to Kristof as a relator for legal purposes. Given the objective evidence in the record of relators' continued presence in and related connections to New York in 2019 and 2020, and the limited detail on key components of his ongoing connections to Oregon, the secretary was not compelled to find that, as of November 2019, relator had re-established his residence in Oregon and intended that Oregon, not New York, be the state in which he would reside indefinitely or, ultimately, to conclude that relator had changed his domicile to Oregon. They wrote, the Supreme Court's opinion may not be the last in the legal battle between Kristof and Fagan. The court gave Kristof until Tuesday, February 22, to request a reconsideration by the justices. Kristof plans to respond to the ruling in a news conference at 10 a.m. Thursday, with Fagan holding her own news conference an hour later. In a tweet, Kristof indicated he won't seek to reconsider the ruling. Today's Supreme Court ruling excluding me from the ballot is, of course, very disappointing, he said. But while I won't be on the ballot, I'm not giving up on our state. I know we can be better. I will continue working to help people who are struggling, who lack opportunity and hope. The court also declined to consider Kristof's arguments that residency requirements violate the U.S. Constitution, saying that question is too complicated to decide in the kind of court case Kristof brought. That does not mean that the courthouse doors are closed to consideration of this claim, just that it is not suited to the extraordinary legal remedy of mandamus, they wrote. Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum, whose office represented Fagan, welcomed the ruling. The Oregon SC today upheld the Oregon SOS decision to disqualify candidate Nick Kristof from the ballot because he does not meet the 3-year residency requirement, Rosenblum tweeted. I appreciate the court's extraordinary efforts to resolve this dispute, quickly give guidance for future candidates. The court decision will have major ramifications for the Democratic primary for governor, where Kristof was one of 3 frontrunners along with former House Speaker Tina Kotek and State Treasurer Tobias Red. Kristof has raised more than twice as much money as Kotek, with $2.7 million to her $1.1 million, though his fundraising has slowed since Fagan's January decision. He continued campaigning after being disqualified from the ballot, meeting with voters on campaign trips and releasing details on his plans to address homelessness. In a statement, Kotek said she hopes Kristof will remain engaged in working to help Oregonians. Nick Kristof has long written about pressing issues facing Oregonians, and his voice will continue to be important as we tackle Oregon's biggest issues, she said. I look forward to working with him as a fellow Democrat. In his own lengthy statement, Reed asked Kristof's supporters to support him instead. This is now a 2-person race for the Democratic nomination for governor, and there is a clear choice, he said. Continue the status quo in Salem or vote for Tobias Reed, someone who isn't afraid to confront the urgent challenges we face in Oregon. Function, use strict window to add event listener, if void 0.